So, one of the things that I do in my daily job is I'm an esports expansion strategist. Now, that does kind of encompass making sure that we've got, my company is Futures First Gaming. We're based out of Wilmington, Delaware. And really, what we do is we fuse esports and gaming with education and workforce development. So my position is esports expansion strategist, which that means that I'm helping them put on some great events and whatnot. But really, one of the things that I help to do is try and get esports and gaming into a classroom. So using kind of gaming as an entertainment nugget or a motivation for learning coding or getting into STEM and STEAM, art and graphic design, that sort of thing. So taking gaming where the kids kind of already are and then using that as an educational tool. And I think really by bringing it into the classroom, we're bringing it into the mainstream, into larger conversations about art and literature and technology.
Awesome. Okay. I was wondering because I haven't heard many people speak about uh, that integration, right? The synergy. And so to develop that, it's very interesting to me because I don't see it implemented in the way that you're describing it often. I see it like I go to university or college and they're trying to create some like esports or gaming program. And they ask me like, Adam, what do we do for X, Y, and Z? And I'm just like, I have no idea. Like this is something where I can bring in some students or like some cyber athletes and they just be like, okay, this works and this is fun, let's do that. I'm like, well, you need some type of like curriculum and like has to be structured in a way that people can understand, especially parents. Uh, the parents side of things where education meets kind of the thought culture around gaming and esports, that's something that needs a lot of work.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. So I'm actually really lucky in that, and it sounds weird to say, but I actually got into gaming really late. I've only kind of been in the world of gaming for the past 4-ish years. I graduated this past August from the College of New Jersey with a master's degree in English. So I've kind of been on the literature side of things for my whole life. And then I started to get into, running these esports events and actually playing games myself. And I really saw that suddenly there was just this innate connection between the games that I was playing and the books that I was reading in the classroom. And, you see behind me, I've got this big old library. So there really is like an actual connection there. And there are a lot of applicable skills between gaming kind of on your own and then actually taking those skills and bringing them to the classroom. I don't think it's incredibly far-fetched to say that, you could take a video game and teach that as though it were a piece of literature. It's not a big gap there, and there's definitely not a large gap between, playing games and then making a Minecraft mod and then learning to code, and that's applicable workplace skills. I think people kind of separate the act of playing the game from the act of learning about the skills that go into it. I think that's really something that we need to understand. They're really interlocked. It's really two things that you can kind of marry together there.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed just from my career and like profession, a lot of people will contact me and the kind of same three questions pop into their minds. So like, okay, first of all, how do we get money? Or what do we do with the money? Or it's something in the lines of if we have money and we know what to do with the money, how do we kind of grow and scale that? And I was like, okay, this applies directly to education specifically because for me, when I was in university, I was in business management for about a semester, then I dropped out. So I already had like a company mentoring. And so I was like, well, I'm already like doing what I preach. And so like to be in university and to try and like understand people who are like gamers versus like the person who's I'm gaming now, but like back in university, I didn't really game a lot because I was working. And so like to look back, I was like, okay, I'm working in the gaming industry / on the gaming industry, but like I'm not a gamer technically at this moment. And so like the skills I was learning, I just applied them to my business, and that was really helpful. But then my business failed back in January, and then I was like, okay, I lost some money and time, and like people don't talk about the risks involved if you don't take the skills that you learn from gaming and translate them to other things. Like, for example, back when I was younger, played a lot of basketball. So when I was playing basketball, I always thought, okay, well, how do I make sure that I'm either like the best point guard or whatever, and then how do I kind of translate that into the world of gaming, where I'd be like, okay, if I'm playing something like Call of Duty, for example, okay, how do I kind of set up the best position, right, the best environment to get like the cleanest shot or something, and like there are all these, I guess, tactics and strategies, but in reality, like these are really applicable back to education, and I don't see uh, that type of leeway where people kind of speak with their parents or their siblings or their close loved ones about like, okay, I'm learning this from gaming. Let me think about how to make it more applicable in my life, because it's not something where I just do it for fun. Some people are professional gamers. Some people make content on YouTube. Some people create entire video game studios, and they just develop games. And I see this being more relevant now rather than later, because gaming just keeps blowing up during COVID.
Right, yeah. I definitely think that unfortunately, with a lot of people being home right now, a lot of people have kind of been more exposed to gaming, which is kind of like the good side in a really bad situation. But one of the things that, we're seeing at Futures First Gaming is that there are a lot more schools coming to us saying, hey, these kids are doing these things at home. We have a computer in front of them all day. How can we take gaming and how can we use that to kind of feed their education? And really, like you drew a connection with basketball. A lot of the kids that we work with are pretty young, but when I was younger, I played a lot of soccer. And like anyone who played sports when they were a kid or was in little league or anything like that knows, you're playing a game, you're, expending a lot of energy, but you're also learning these really important skills. You're learning teamwork, you're learning communication, there's critical thought, that sort of thing. Um, and it's really similar with gaming. I don't think that there needs to be that much of a difference. And like I was saying before, I don't think the connection is that large to make when you're playing a big game. You're playing your Fortnite or your Call of Duty or whatever. You're in a voice chat with people. You're using communication skills to explain, okay, watch out on your left. There's someone coming, or just Rocket League. It's soccer, but it's a game. So I really think that a lot of the skills that we kind of teach kids when they're younger through educational play, like little league, or just like the games that they would play in kindergarten to kind of teach these things, it's really not that different with video games. I just think there's that barrier of newness and strangeness. um, it's not something that you're used to associating with education. And I know that unfortunately our education system in the US can be kind of slow to update. Um, but I really do have hope that that can start to change in the next couple of years, especially with, the leaps in technology that we've been making recently, but also, again, unfortunately, a lot of people are home right now, but the benefit of that is they've learned how to integrate technology into their life a little bit better.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot recently. I've been working from home so much at this point. I'm like, can I go back to like an office setting? Like, I've only been in that situation a few times in my life, but then I was thinking, if I have a company or something, like, can I really just have everybody working remotely? Like that's something I think about critically, because I'm like, to reduce decision fatigue, I'm trying to make like a few really important decisions per day, and everything else is just like I can't think about it, because the I think the anxiety of being a gamer and then trying to learn how to apply the skills you learn in gaming to, like, let's say if you're in math class or something and you're not sure about how to solve some type of equation, and of course you can go to like a textbook or a teacher or Google, but like if you can like think about gaming in terms of like a math equation, and then you can solve problems that way, like you could really just teach yourself how to solve almost any problem. And the fun part about that is that gaming is designed to be something that's a challenge, but at the same time, you have progression, or you have levels in some cases, and you can kind of see that progress. But in life, you might not always see that progress immediately. And so I was thinking to kind of gamify uh, that experience when you're learning. The gamification part is really important because people want to have that gratification about seeing progress, right? Like a level up bar, but then at the same time, they also want to know that okay, this is the next level where this challenge is going to be something that's exceedingly more difficult, and hopefully they're equipped with the tools to solve those challenges.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of one of the things that's really beautiful about a lot of modern game design and even classic game design, is that it's, I think back to in college, I took a class on the psychology of design, and we talked about flow state, and how you've got your sort of ascending bar of difficulty, but staying within a range of too difficult and too easy to kind of keep people going through that same uh, thinking loop and creativity loop that's getting them, constantly improving, but without the frustration of, oh, this is too easy, or oh, this is too difficult, I can't do this. And one of the great things is that with a lot of games nowadays is there's so much critical thought involved. There's a lot of puzzle solving. Again, I'm a book nerd, so I'm always going to go back to narrative. um, there's a lot of narrative conventions that really make you sit there, get invested in the story, but also think about things like storyline progression and character arc, the hero's journey. All of this stuff is still applicable. Um, so I really do think that there's a lot of critical thought involved in gaming. So really, every time someone sits down in front of a game and starts to play, they're going through these exercises in critical thinking and decision making and communication. So it's really just exercising skills that you already have, but you're just developing them more. And there aren't a lot of facets of your daily life where you can really go through all of these skills and hone them all at once. When you're at work, you might be working on a couple different things, but you're normally kind of in this one rut of doing the same thing repetitively, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you're not always kind of flexing that, they say left brain, right brain. But when you're gaming, you're really kind of doing both. It's a generative act because, absorbing content is creative in and of itself. It is generative. Um, but also it's, analytic. You're going through and you're solving puzzles and you're trying to find the most efficient way to do something. And I think it's kind of beautiful because there aren't many things you can do that exercise both.
Yeah, I learned a lot about that over the last year. I tried to get back into gaming seriously, and I was like, you know what? I'm young enough to be a professional athlete or cyber athlete, as you call them. But then I'm like, do I really want to put in like 8 hours a day gaming? Like,
It's a lot.
I'm not sure if I can like physically handle that. And it's just like, it's kind of crazy to think that like some gamers, the way that they operate, it's like if you compare them to like a top business person, it's like really similar. I'm just like, okay, so the average person can't do that. And like they probably can't do that because like if you do that for a long period of time, it's definitely not healthy. And I think that's very similar to entrepreneurship because I think in like high school and college, I was really focused on like, okay, how do I like uh, project like the best career path or like what's going to be like the best earning job or whatever. But then like once you get into like the working world, you see like okay, there's not really one best career path. You can have totally different separate career paths. You might become a doctor later in life, but right now you might be doing some type of like car wash business or something. And there's so many different variables that you can consider if you just choose something right now, even if it's not necessarily the right thing for you, or it's something you're passionate about, or something you really are happy about, later on you can develop those skills as you were talking about, and through gamification, right, you can kind of track this as like a real life RPG game, and you can kind of just measure against yourself, right? You're not really competing against other people. You're measuring about, what is the best satisfaction or fulfillment or like purpose, the meaning in your life, and you can kind of measure that as like an overarching goal, and then kind of break those things down in terms of like health and wellness and things like that. That's something where I focused on that a lot this last year.
Yeah, no, I do think that's really important. And yeah, in terms of, how quickly things can change, like I said, 4 years ago, I didn't even consider this as a career path. I was like firmly set on the path to be like a textbook editor, which now that doesn't even click for me. Um, but yeah, really, I think some people kind of shy away from the gamification of daily life, which I mean, I think it's really helpful. I've actually been using a notebook that I've kind of gamified as my daily planner, because I always have so many things going on, and I tend to get a little bit overwhelmed with all the projects that I'm working on for both work and personal projects, but kind of thinking of it as like, okay, so here's something that I've done that's like, okay, if you're familiar with D&D, like giving yourself like a +1 to charisma if you like kind of took a day to yourself to kind of recharge, or a +1 to strength if you worked out today or something like that. And just kind of going through it, so it's a little bit less tedious in my opinion, but it also just kind of helps me keep all my ducks in a row. Yeah, fun little things.
Definitely. I was thinking earlier, like I was reading the description you wrote about what you wanted to discuss, and I was like, man, if people like understood like the value of this, like I think my overwhelming experience when I was younger is just like, okay, gaming is here for fun. Like you're never gonna have a career out of it. You're never gonna become a pro. You're just gonna like play for a few hours and like that's it. But now it's like, okay, I managed an esports organization. I've done like other things in esports and gaming. And now it's just like I even worked on a game, and it's just like, okay, well, I have all this like gaming experience, but like I didn't like plan for any of this in like high school or college, and I didn't know that a lot of these opportunities were even available. And it's especially kind of frustrating to me because I was thinking if I had known what I know now back then, gaming would have been something I'd been like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do this 100%, and like I'm not gonna get distracted. But then like when I was younger, I wanted to be like a neurosurgeon, and I was like, okay, what do I need to do to like understand how my amygdala works and like other things like that. And I was like super into that for a while, and then I was like, well, I'm basically doing the same amount of hours to like become a doctor, but like working on my company. And then my company failed, and then I was like, okay, so if I fail as a doctor, right, like as a neurosurgeon especially, right, the fallout would be a lot higher. And I was like, okay, if I can mitigate the risk and kind of like focus on what are those like first principles things that I know like they're just gonna work. If I just do X, Y is gonna happen. And then if Y happens, I can go back to some type of other form or function and just be like, okay, input X and then Y happens. And for me, that was always gaming. But then when I focused on gaming, there was always a new Y, and I was like, okay, there's always some type of new opportunity happening in gaming that didn't happen in any other type of field for me. And I was really puzzled by that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I could just be lucky. But then I'm like, luck doesn't seem to strike twice in the same way unless it's like a really random occurrence. And I was like, okay, this might be something I'm good at. But then like years passed, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm good at this, well, why don't I focus on this? And then why don't I try to like expound on what I can do with these skills? And then I started to realize like, okay, yeah, gaming is something where I can make a career and that's sustainable. And then uh, compared to like being a neurosurgeon, right, I'm working the same amount of hours, but like I can hire somebody, or I can like build some type of team or product or service where like the neurosurgeon, yeah, I might have my tools, but at the end of the day, the risk isn't messing somebody's brain up. It's just, okay, me being responsible for the company. And then if the company fails, okay, well, there's some type of, maybe backlash or whatever with people and drama and politics, but like I can survive that. And unlike the neurosurgeon, right, if they fail, if they mess up, the backlash from that is like, well, what do you have to do with like that type of health insurance to cover the patient or the family, right? In terms of the loss. And that's something where I think for gaming, because you often have like a second life, I was thinking, well, if I only have this one life to live in this one moment, right? How could I prepare for like the best possible life to live and make every single decision kind of like similar to Steve Jobs, how he said like you can only connect the dots looking backward. I was like, okay, how can I connect all the dots looking backwards? But then for gaming, it was more like I need to play the game in order to change the game. And then once I can change the game, I can start to connect the dots looking backward. And that took me a long time to understand.
Yeah, no, I got you there. But it's really exciting how quickly I think things have changed, and how quickly things have moved along with gaming. Um, I like I was saying, I really didn't consider this a career a couple of years ago, but now I can't imagine doing anything else. Um, and a few years ago, I think bringing up video games in an educational sense would have gotten you some pretty interesting looks. But nowadays, it just kind of seems natural. You teach coding with something that you code. You teach literature with something that has different narrative pathways. Um, you teach critical thought with puzzles. It just feels natural now, but a couple of years ago that would have been absolutely insane. But I think we're at a really, really good point in history for things to start changing. We're at like the pathways of growing technology, greater connectivity, and more, open-mindedness in the classroom where we can really start to build something important. But the other thing is you can't miss this moment. We need to make sure that we're really dedicating ourselves to doing better in terms of education, to making sure that we're not being, closed-minded with what we're doing. Like, oh no, that can't be done because it's never been done before. Like, you have to take the first step before it can be, institutionalized. Um, but I really do think that if we can kind of, grab hold of the moment that we've been presented with, future generations are really, really going to benefit from this. And I think there's really, you can only go up from here, right?
Yeah, like I don't know if it's just the environment, but like I see what happened in like the gaming industry over the last year or two, and I was like, dude, there's so many advancements, like especially like virtual reality. Like there's so many games which I haven't seen before, and I was like, wow, I didn't even know this like technology existed. And I was like, it's not even like super expensive as it used to be. Like before, I was like, do I have to like bust out 500 like dollars or $1,000 or like
Yeah.
$2,000? But like you can use your smartphone and like you have a VR setup like that, and it's just like maybe you need a controller or two, or then maybe you need like a headset. But then the headsets aren't even super expensive anymore either, and so it's just like if you can push yourself to have like intrinsic motivation, like internally, just figure out what you want to do and go do that. Despite the obstacles, there's going to be a lot of things I think in gaming where people need to learn. Like, okay, if you're going to do X, then Y definitely will happen. But at the same time, like, there's a lot of unknowns too. Like, we have no idea how big esports is really yet, and people say it's like $1 billion industry, but then I'm like, there are people who won't even look at esports until it has like $1 trillion in assets, and that's like all the fund managers and people like that. And like whenever I talk to these people, it's like they look at esports, but like they don't really like take a deep dive. They're just like, okay, well, what seems like the next best opportunity? And like I have no idea. It's esports. Like it's been around for like 49 years. Like it's a super young industry, and we don't really have a ton of data. Unfortunately, we don't have like a model of what works. And for gaming, on the other hand, like you can do really almost anything, and like the gamification aspect of that works because like whether it was something like Flappy Bird back in the day or something like Fortnite with the metaverse where like you have concerts in virtual reality and people didn't think they were going to go to a virtual console, but now that they're paying like you know either to buy Fortnite or attend a virtual concert, like it's just something that they do naturally.
Yeah, like I said, we're in really exciting times right now. I In terms of, you know, people not really trusting the esports industry, I think that's understandable to a point, but I also think, you know, every sport that is huge now, you know, football, baseball, soccer, whatever, each and every one of those started out in a field somewhere, right? It didn't grow into this massive industry overnight. Um, and I just think that with esports, we're at the horizon of a, you know, a new day, um, where all of the sudden there is this new option. And I do think in time it'll be picked up a little bit more, because one of the great things about esports is that, you know, there's no physical barrier to ability. So, you know, if you're, you know, in a wheelchair, you can play along with someone who isn't. And that's just something that's, you know, traditional sports are kind of closed off in that sense. It's very focused on physical ability, obviously. But with esports, it's a lot more open, and you can have co-ed leagues. So I think it's a matter of time before things start to change in that regard. But it just kind of, you know, changing the mindset of people who have been doing something, industries that have been working a certain way for so long. It can be kind of slow going to start to change and adjust that. But again, hopefully, I choose to see that we're at an exciting turning point. Um, and I hope other people share that view, as opposed to being afraid of the moment, kind of embracing it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think my past experience overall, when I actually give it some thought seriously, I just thought, well, esports is a joke. Like, people don't take it as seriously as they really need to, because like people are becoming cyber athletes, which before nobody thought that was possible. And now people are, I think, in all seriousness, like David Beckham to like T-Pain, like all these other super celebrities getting into esports and gaming. And you think, well, why are these people attaching themselves to these brands or these companies or these games? And it's just like, it's not just cool, like it's super, super profitable. But then at the same time, the opportunity to really expand, like business wise and education wise, it just wasn't there earlier. And I was thinking, like, Google has like an esports and gaming project, right? They got Stadia and all these other things, and like Microsoft and like all these other top companies have these things, and Amazon. And it's just like, well, if all these guys are getting into esports and gaming, like it's probably something really important that you can't really pass up. And Facebook gaming, especially, it's like, I don't know the stats specifically, but they were awarding so much money to like the top content creators on that platform in the beginning, and I was like, these guys don't even have like the requirements for Facebook gaming versus like Twitch or YouTube to become a partner. It was like so crazy to me, because I'm like, anybody can go on this platform and they have 2 billion endemic users, and then they can just get an audience like instantly. And on YouTube, like you couldn't really, you could do that, but it's so difficult because you have to fight against the algorithm. On Facebook, you already have your friends there and your family. And I was like, it's kind of a super big brain to make that move for Facebook, but I think it's just the beginning, and I don't really know where it's going to go yet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really exciting things, is how quickly it can change, and how vastly it can change in such a short amount of time. Um, I was actually talking with a relative of mine who works in government and treasury not long ago, just trying to help, you know, one of my cousins find his first job. Um, and we were talking about our jobs, and I was like, yeah, you know, it's a lot of really long nights and a lot of early mornings and kind of keeping weird hours and multitasking and doing 10 things at once. And she's like, Emily, I work in government, I know what that's like. So to have esports and gaming from an administration standpoint compared to a government job, I think that really shows how dedicated the people that work here are. um, just the amount of time and effort and care that we put into everything that we do to get it this far, and then to take it even further. um, you know, not really knowing where it's going is exciting, but also it's kind of invigorating knowing that there's always going to be more work to be done. There's not a ton of advancement that you can do in the NFL, right? Football isn't going to change overnight, but technology can, and esports can. So this constantly evolving industry is always presenting new challenges to be overcome. And one of the really exciting things that I think is emphasized more so in gaming than in any other industry is the fact that it's very youth driven. So there's a lot of innovation happening in high schools and especially colleges because, these younger kids are more involved with newer technologies than kind of the old guard. So it's constantly bringing in not just fresh content and fresh faces, but always newer methodologies that really has to evolve day to day with the new technology, with new games, new platforms. I don't think you really see that in any other industry, but I think that's one of the reasons why esports and gaming has that survivability that a lot of other industries might not have. A lot of gaming companies in the pandemic, this was just kind of a hiccup in terms of operation because of staying in touch with these newer technologies that allow remote work. It's really what kind of keeps us innovating and keeps us going and make sure that we're ready, not just for tomorrow, but for the challenges that tomorrow brings.
Awesome, Emily. Thank you so much for your time. I'm very pleased to have spoken with you, and I look forward to seeing your work. There's so much I want to speak with you on in the future in terms of education and how this will be further expanded upon, just with my own experience, but also with the people that I work with in terms of education. So that's something where I'll definitely get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always around. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
All right. Thank you. You too.